Winter is coming and street photographers huddle by their fires, but when really we should be outside. You know, the dark tones from above are going to create shadows, and the rain is going to create beautiful sparkles on the streets. We're going to have lots of opportunities, but one thing that I'm going to keep my eye on, and that is I've set myself a goal, and that is to work more with colour. And so this winter I'm going to keep looking for the colour. And that's going to brighten my mind, but also hopefully give me an enormous creative challenge in the days that come over the next couple of months or so, where it's obviously going to be quite dull. And the way I do this is to use the imagination and ask myself, where can I go in this city at night time and also on these dull days of autumn and winter, and discover something full of colour. And the most obvious thing is to be inspired by photographers such as Alex Webb and Harry Gruet, and you go looking in the places where possibly other people go looking for entertainment, as cafes, bars, etc. And in this day and age, you've got neon and digital lights galore all over a city. Where there's these doorways with you know, beautiful lights just splashing out into the street. You think of the opportunity there with the colour of light in water on the ground, possibly when it's still raining, taking a shot of that. It's using the imagination to know that somewhere in the city there's going to be something worth photographing, and rain can create some fantastic shots. Customers may be sitting down at a table or a bar against the window drinking their coffee or their beer, and they're chatting away or looking out of the window, but there's also wonderful sort of reflections coming from the street. And these are great opportunities to exercise the imagination and challenge yourself to do something a bit more. This is the thing about winter. Instead of seeing it as a glum time, see it as a time of creative opportunity. The dark shadows of the night, or the dark shadows that come in the daytime, especially when the evening light is beginning to come through, they can often serve as a way to frame a shot. Imagine a dark street and a little lonely cafe with lots of neon lights blasting out through the window, and then you look in, you see people drinking coffee and tea, chatting, wearing colourful clothes. It's one of the things about winter is that I tend to notice in the summertime people are dressed in very basic, skimpy white t-shirt or a black t-shirt and a pair of jeans and trainers, and that's it. But come the winter time, people are wrapping up, they're putting on clothing which is normally a little bit more colourful, reds and greens. Berlin is full of yellows, yellow buses, yellow post boxes, and so they can act as sort of street furniture that is very useful as props. And one of the most important things about street photography is to view it as something very open to creativity. It isn't a specific thing. There are people who like to pretend that that street photography must be portrait photography. I have no idea why I'd want to take the portrait, close-up portrait of a stranger. And also, I don't want to elicit anything from a stranger on the street and try and get them to grimace or anything like this, unless of course they engage with me in a way which is friendly and they know that I've got the camera. I'll go ahead and take a shot if they smile at me or something like that. But I'm not looking for people who are angry because they're angry at me or anything like that. I won't be doing any of that type of thing. One of the most important things though is to always remember that creativity should be driven by passion, not obsession. I do find that, you know, if you read around the web about all types of things that people are doing today, and it could be any of the arts, people talk about you've got to be obsessed. This is nonsense because it's very unhealthy and we don't want to live unhealthy lives. In order to be an artist, a photographer, and also to stay healthy throughout life, it's a long life, so you want to do that, is to be passionate about things. That's a much different emotion to obsession. It's obsession that will lead you into following fads and doing what you think must be done in order to achieve something. But passion is something that will actually open up avenues of creativity for you, and they'll come from within rather than without. You don't want to follow other people, you want to follow your own instinct, and that instinct can be driven by the passion to create wonderful art. And in my books, really, street photography, it is really creating art out of the city streets. It's where it really comes from. I don't think people like Henri Bresson would have imagined that they're street photographers. I mean, the phrase was hardly used back then. It was more city photographer, urban photographer, but they're documenting life on the streets of the city. And that's what we're doing. Where I am, there's some very strict laws about what I can and can't do. Many people believe that because these laws are very strict and they're fairly recent, they believe that it means I'm not allowed to take a photo of human beings on the street. This is absolute nonsense, because I've read it. Also, I've read that certain judges around Germany have actually voiced an opinion, and that is that they don't want to see street portraits, they don't want to see close-up shots where clearly one person is the centre of focus and therefore it's a personal shot. It's very strictly no, against the law, don't do it. But these judges, same judges, have said they're not going to prosecute anybody who's a street photographer who is creating art or attempting to create art. There's nothing wrong with that, and inevitably their photos will be full of people. But as soon as you start getting close, you've got to make your own judgment. How close is too close, where one person becomes a centre of attention and that it's clearly could be defined as a portrait. You just need to stay away from that. If you're anywhere in Europe, you can't do this. So you've got to make up your own mind about where your passion drives you. And it's the most important thing about creativity is consistency in what you're doing. That's what I mean about the difference between obsession and passion, is that passion will drive creativity, it will sustain creativity. Obsession will drive you down the wrong road, because you'll just be following things that you think might lead somewhere, but really that thing came from somebody else's idea, somebody else's fad, somebody else, you've got to do this, you've got to do that type of thing that you may have heard somewhere. You should really just ignore those type of people and follow your own passion. You'll find it's a lot more rewarding. To discover your own passion is to discover also that sustainable enthusiasm that drives you on. And as these winter days draw in, and the weather today outside of my place, it's snow and sleet, it's wet, it's dark, and I can't wait to get out there with my camera and take a few shots. At some point in the next 48 hours, I'm definitely walking out the door with only one intention, and that is to take some of these late autumn shots, see what's going on, see what I can get. And I trust my own creativity, my enthusiasm, which is driven by my passion, to come back with one shot would be plenty. My intention is to go out and look for colour this winter. I want to look for colour and work with colour. Colour is important. We live in times when cameras can pick up fantastic tones and textures. As creative people, we're always looking for some form of growth. It gives us a feeling that we're moving forwards, and that's very human, to feel that we actually make progress. I do think that it's when we're out there and we're working very hard and being very creative, looking for the things that we might envision in the first place, that we discover that we see some form of growth. And this comes through the enthusiasm, the creativity, and that passion that we need in order to keep going. It's obsessive attitudes that always leave us worn out and exhausted and feeling like we don't want to go back and do it anymore. So that's what I mean about creativity and passion. Work on that and don't become an obsessive character. If you're ever looking for any inspiration, really, you do need to look at the work of other artists, other photographers. And don't just look at street photographers, look at painters too, and how they handle colour, line, texture, etc. How they create compositions. And if there's one thing that I would suggest that anybody who is beginning street photography should really begin to work at, with an attitude of wanting to master it or find something in it at least, and that is composition. Start thinking about composition, then discovering somewhere in that composition that there is in fact a very great point of interest, which would be your frame. If you don't firstly look at the composition, you're going to probably end up feeling a bit lost, looking for how do I frame this, how do I frame this, I don't know. Or you frame something interesting, but outside of that in a frame within one big composition, you haven't really composited, you haven't really put a composition together in any particular way. And it's probably the first thing, composition, and then learning about, and very quickly, you know, as soon as you get the idea of composition, you start to realize that there must be a point within the whole image that is of great interest, because that's the point that the human eye will go back to all of the time. It's what makes people stay interested in your photograph. Something in it is intriguing, interesting, or worth going back to look at again and again, because the eyes move around depending what part of the world you come from, how you read, how you've learnt to read. If you're from the West, you're probably reading left to right, and so you look at a photo up in the top left corner and then move along and look your way through it, or you might even look at it in a sort of circular way. Just depends on what the composition is as well. We don't necessarily read a photo as if we're reading words, but we do begin on the left and we move our head, and somewhere in there there's going to be a point of great interest, and we find it. But then we go off and look for the connecting parts. That's the composition, and then we come around again and we will automatically go back to that point of most interest, because it's the center point that gives us an anchor for ideas about why the other parts are important too. And so it's well worth practicing that, the composition, and then framing something within that composition that creates a very strong image. It's when you concentrate on the work of photography and your own unique goals of achieving a level of professional artistry or creative output that you realize that the camera that you have can really be pushed. And this will always happen when you feel the drive of enthusiastic and passionate work that is free of obsessive behavior. So our real inspiration comes when we are driven by something that comes from within. And so that's where the real stuff happens. It's when you will go out and you are driven to go out and you really want to find something. That's a lovely feeling, because that means you've got strong intention. And in photography, intention is really important, to go out there and know that you want a great shot, you want people in it, you want buildings, structures, architecture, you will find it. In order to understand composition, in order to use it as a structure or an idea that you could always practice and always focus on as being the main component of your work, it helps you to look at other people's work. It also helps you to listen to other people's work, and that means music and good music. Listen to the composition of music. Think about scales, think about rhythms, think about progressions of chords, and the different type of textures and feelings that it creates. When you look at a very masterly photograph, something that has been achieved through a lot of hard work by another photographer, or a painting, look for passages and look for ideas and textures. You begin to see that these are the things that create composition. It's not just geometrical shapes. Composition is everything. It's texture, it's colour, it's line, it's shadow, it's light. It's the tiniest detail that can add or take away from a good composition. And so study other people's work and find maybe 3 or 4 or 5 other artists or photographers that you like very much, and consistently go back to them and look at their work. We're very lucky these days that online we can look at the work of great artists, great street photographers. Don't narrow yourself down just to street photography. Narrow yourself down to something that is big, and that is creativity. That's where it's at, is the passion that you find inside of yourself. That will take you to the place that you're meant to go to. It will take you to the place where you'll begin to create fantastic work, because the only way that you can act freely, and when you act freely, you're being very truthful with yourself. And it's freezing cold out there, but each and every time it does mean you've got to get off my arse and get out the door and spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours out there taking photos and taking my opportunity to be a very creative person. It's the best thing you can do in life, is allow your creativity to freely flow and come back home with a camera full of great photos, and I recommend you do it. So, doesn't matter what sort of camera you got, whatever you have, mobile phone right through to DSLR, like I use the Canons all the time, and Sigma lenses, a couple of Canon lenses too. I love my Canon DSLR. It's the 5D Mark IV. So anybody interested in that type of thing, I put a few links down below as to the equipment that I use, and I totally recommend it. You know, bear in mind, I'm one of these people who think all you need is the tools, and these are the tools I use, and so would never recommend anything that I just, you know, wouldn't buy myself. Anyway, thanks for listening. It would be lovely if you subscribed, because I'm doing my best to try and create very interesting and helpful videos that are enjoyable to listen to and watch. All the best until next time. Bye bye.